Man as part of the community, what is social? Family as the best support system for the individual. By Markus Krall. Man is a social being. This phrase actually comes from behavioral biology, and our empirical experience tells us that it is true. We are a species whose members are in constant interaction and continual exchange with other members of the same species. We communicate, act, trade, help, love, hate, wage war, fight, rescue, and influence each other constantly. Yes, even verbs with negative connotations describe social interaction. We value being part of and a member of a community, a family, a society, even a country. No one wants to be or be perceived as asocial or antisocial, because such interaction is an essential element of survival for every individual. We are individuals, but we are not a race of Robinson Crusoes. In this descriptive sense, the term social is initially value neutral. However, the term social becomes value-laden only when it is combined with a moral or ethical component that is based on how we are supposed to regard our fellow human beings. There is already something implicit in that term. By perceiving ourselves as thinking, feeling beings with self-awareness, we not only recognize our self-conscious I, our cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, but we also create a personal structure of needs, which for example includes the avoidance of suffering and pain. Evolutionarily, we also transfer this to the members of our family, which, genetically considered, represents the temporal extension of our individuality and our influence on reality. The family, or in the Stone Age, the horde, is the protective space of the individual. The capacity for empathy is therefore the necessary result of the evolutionary process, because mutual aid within this framework increases the survival probability for every member of this smallest social unit. As with our fundamental reflection on the concept of freedom, we can see here as well that evolution and religion, unsurprisingly, arrive at the same conclusion. The biblical command, love your neighbor as yourself, corresponds directly with the logic of the familial protective and trust bond. That is logical too, for as the New Testament explains, the law was made for man, not man for the law. Even in the matter of social relationships, the biblical law reflects the nature of man. Man is thus both free and a social being. Are these two characteristics in conflict, or are they necessary complementary elements of our being? They are necessarily complementary if they are not taken out of context. This context of the social in the sense of mutual aid arises again from both perspectives in the same way. In evolution, it is the genetic family bond. In religion, it is the neighbor. To put it more dramatically, we are responsible for those entrusted to us, but we are not the welfare office of the world. In our responsibility, we must first concern ourselves with what happens within our own four walls, then with what happens at our front door, and only much later, and only if it directly affects our interests, with the rest of the world. No discussion about the social is complete without considering the elegant term, social market economy. Here too we face the task of clarifying the terms. There are two radically opposing, and indeed essentially incompatible definitions of what the social market economy is. They come, unsurprisingly, from opposing political camps, namely proponents of the market and proponents of socialism. As is so often the case, the leftist usurpers of the term have succeeded in this matter in gaining an Orwellian linguistic dominance, which is based on the fact that while proponents of the market economy are generally socially oriented, the proponents of socialism lack any shred of market understanding. What are these two interpretations? The proponents of the market economy postulate rightly, as I will attempt to show, that the market economy does not need a social corrective because it is, by its very nature and functioning, social in the sense of genuine justice and not merely a vaguely postulated social justice. On the other hand, the proponents of socialism, albeit grudgingly and temporarily accepting the necessary wealth-generating power of the market, allege that the market is cold and anonymous and therefore does not yield social outcomes. This, they claim, justifies the political coercive correction of its results. To substantiate the postulate that market outcomes are not socially just, two lines of argument are pursued. On the one hand, the spasmodic search for individual cases in which people cannot help themselves, and on the other, the arbitrary definition of needs for the masses, needs whose fulfillment is exalted to an enforceable human right, and the equally arbitrary postulate that failure to satisfy these demands is unsocial. so that social justice can only be achieved through the expropriating and redistributive hand of the state to correct the market. Outcome. These two arguments are frequently interlinked, blurred, watered down, and confused with one another. This is deliberate. The aim is to distort the logic so thoroughly that a logically thinking contemporary, i.e., a proponent of the market economy, can no longer penetrate and resolve the thicket of internal contradictions. While the majority of unthinking contemporaries simply shake their heads and murmur, there's something to this social justice thing after all, since not everyone can help themselves. Therefore, one must consider and analyze both arguments separately. Let us start with the second, since it can be invalidated much more quickly. Strictly speaking, this justification is not even an argument, for it lacks any factual consistency. It consists entirely of assertions and demands that cannot be substantiated. This begins with the formulation of needs for all people. The needs that an individual has stem from his utility function, and there are probably not two persons on the planet with the same utility function and preference structure. Moreover, for the individual, these needs are not stable but in a state of constant flux. They cannot be measured or directly ascertained. There is only one way to determine them, namely through the free market, i.e., the exchange of goods for money. This is so because this process, carried out on a voluntary basis, is the only reliable method of revealing what something, or the satisfaction of a need, is worth to a person at the moment of purchase. Money talks, as the English say. The second fallacy lies in the claim that there is a human right to the satisfaction of this arbitrary collection of purported needs. Human rights are the rights of the individual over his own person. This includes, for example, the right to life, freedom, and privacy. Needs are just that, needs. Their fulfillment is not a right but an incentive for performance. On the contrary, their fulfillment can, without individual effort, namely, through a correction of the market outcome and the expropriation of other people, only occur by violating the human rights of others. Thus, the postulate in its lack of substantiation is not the fulfillment of a human right, but an attack on a human right. Social justice in this sense does not exist, for its arguments can only rely on the arbitrariness of authoritative need definitions, their elevation to a supposed human right, and their enforcement through the plundering of third parties. Yet, social justice does exist in another form. If the false postulates are rejected, they are automatically replaced by correct ones. If there is no logical reason to correct the market outcome, then that outcome is automatically just. Our language has a more pleasing term for that, meritocratic justice. It is the one true social justice in the sense of need fulfillment. The Apostle Paul put it somewhat more harshly. He who does not work, neither shall he eat. This, in addition to the high efficiency of the market economy in providing goods, is primarily due to one reason that underlies the prerequisite for individual success in the market economy. In an order of free exchange, competition is the inevitable consequence of voluntary action. Competition forces every provider of goods and services, that is, every person who participates in economic life at all, to constantly strive for the best price-performance ratio in his offer. He will only be successful if he provides the customer with maximum satisfaction of his need in that sense. In other words, before he can address his own needs, he must first fulfill the needs of others. The more successful he is at this, the more successful he will be, and the more income will flow to him as a result of the market process. That is truly social and just. This devastating view of the arbitrary term social justice does not, however, devalue the separately considered argument that there are people who cannot help themselves and who, through no fault of their own, find themselves in such a situation. How does the market order deal with this? First, we must understand that this problem affects only a very small number of people, probably less than 2 to 3% of the population. Why is this number so small? Because it essentially affects only those people who, from birth or childhood, suffer from a disability that prevents them from participating in economic life in the manner necessary for their livelihood. For nearly everyone else, the risk can be mitigated through saving and precaution, insurance, and prudent action, tools provided by the market. In the business world, this is called risk management. As individuals, we have become accustomed to the state taking over all our life risks. It finances this by taking away half of our income and is not particularly effective in risk management. If we were to give not 50%, but only 10% of our income to the state, we would all have more than enough left for private risk management of any kind. One might now argue that not every person plans prudently. The answer to that is quite simple. So what? Is it the responsibility of others if someone overindulges in securing his livelihood? No, it is not. After all, the discussion was about those not at fault, not about those who act recklessly. The argument is somewhat reminiscent of the 19th century conversation between a hardworking bourgeois and a communist. Communist, give me half of your wealth so that justice may prevail. Citizen, well, I have a question. If I give you half and then act frugally while you squander your half on whores and wine, what happens then? Communist, then we'll probably have to split it again. But how do we help the 2 to 3% of truly needy people? The answer is as clear as it is obvious. For that, functioning families are there. The so-called welfare state has largely destroyed the family by eliminating the incentive to manage all life risks. Nevertheless, this does not change the fact that the family is, first and foremost, the most enduring, best, and most adaptable social system for the individual. Moreover, the close-knit family bond ensures that everyone truly contributes according to his ability, a form of control that the welfare state can only achieve by eliminating all privacy. Not that it wouldn't try. Behind this defense of the family, probably significantly less than 1% of those in need remain who then still require assistance. Not the 60% of all citizens who are today welfare recipients. For them, what the Bible describes as voluntary charity in the beautiful story of the Good Samaritan applies. True charity is always voluntary. I searched for it, but I did not find the passage in the Bible where it says, "And the Samaritan went to Pilate's tax collector and said to him, 'Out there on the street lies a robbery victim. Go and extort more taxes from the people and give it to me so that I can help him.' And the tax collector went and did as he was told and called it a solidarity tax." In the very market-oriented order of the 19th century, when the number of needy people was much higher due to the still young industrial age than it is today, it was considered proper conduct to engage in charitable activities. It was a demonstration of the successful individual's own performance capacity. Entrepreneurs and successful people are, by and large, socially inclined. Voluntary charity is therefore the better alternative for the few who truly need it. Sorry, dear do-gooders, it does not work to hoard karma with other people's money. You have to use your own money for that.